I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. Firstly, that's a great song, isn't it? You're simply the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's synonymous with the Adair's UDA. You know, it really is.
Is it?
Yeah, everyone up here links that song to them, and it was his idea to steal it for propaganda purposes.
Bloody hell. I didn't realise that now because, you'd hear it being linked to other sort of, even sporting events and everything over the years. And, wasn't it used even was it Barack Obama's campaign or one of the president's campaigns from memory it was used in? But I definitely wouldn't have linked it to Johnny Mad Dog Adair.
Oh, totally. I mean, I've been at events that there were always what you called, Nicola, shows of strength, where the tension would build up around bonfires and things like that. I remember being at one 11th night bonfire and the huge bonfire, and it was lit, and then that music started to play, and the crowd gathered, and then suddenly, from nowhere, these four men appeared in military fatigues with balaclavas on and guns, and came right out in front of the crowd and fired up into the air as simply the best.
Right.
Was blasted out over the tannoy, and the crowd went crazy. Absolutely loved it. They emptied all their weapons, waved to the crowd, and disappeared just as quickly. And that was them all set for a party.
So it was totally politicized up there. The song was it long? Was it long out when Johnny Adair decided to? Was it?
Adair? No, it wasn't long out.
Yeah,
it was the early '90s. I think the song came out. I mean, I looked up the history of the song. It was written by Mike Chapman, but it wasn't written for Tina. She just took it up and transformed it, made it her own. And Adair latched onto it. I mean, he talks about her quite passionately. She was queen of soul, he says. But he wasn't too pleased that she threatened to sue him.
Right. So let's get on to that. So they had started to use this song at various rallies, and it had become synonymous with them with the UFF. What happened? How did Tina Turner sort of realize that?
Adair used it at every show of strength. It was the signature tune for something was going to happen that was worth watching, and the crowd knew it by this time. And as soon as the first few bars of Simply the Best came on, the crowd swelled to get a good view, and from nowhere, four gunmen would appear in immaculately dressed in military fatigues, shoes, boots shining, the web belts on, balaclavas disguising their faces, but all fit-looking young men, and they come out with high-powered rifles, AK-47 style rifles, and two with handguns, and fired them up into the air as the crowd went crazy. And they emptied the weapons, waved to the crowd, who roared their approval, and they disappeared just as quickly. And that was usually the signal for the celebrations of whatever kind to start. But it was always going. The night I remember the first night I saw it, there was a bonfire in the background, them in front. It made a magnificent picture for the newspaper.
And it would be naive to think that this was just a catchy tune that Adair liked. There was actually some marketing thought went into all this, and he did at one point order T-shirts with the slogan on it. He obviously was a man who, in another world, and take away the violence, could have been a businessman, probably a CEO of a company.
Well, I mean, I said to him, why did you choose it? And he said, well, it's simply the best. They said, we were simply the best. They said, the UFF wasn't the UDA. They said, and we were the SAS of loyalist terrorism. They said, and we were the best. So that's why he did it. And and all newspapers waited for that moment. It was a great picture to get, and Adair knew that they loved it, and he presented it. I mean, I asked him last week about it, and he told me specifically chose it. He was a Tina Turner fan, and as soon as she launched the song, released the song, he said, "We're going to take that for ourselves."
Mm.
So it became synonymous with him and with his particular section of the UDA stroke UFF. And it was always, every time a show of strength was launched in different parts of the north, but always on the Lower Shankill Road. That's where it had the biggest reaction.
So unlike the legitimate world, and I suppose the corporate world, where to use a slogan or a song like that would have entailed probably boardroom loads of lawyers sitting down, hammering out an agreement, and a massive fee being paid over. Paramilitaries and organized criminals just take, don't they? They don't actually go through any process to use anything. So that's exactly what he did. He
No,
took
there
it
was
for
no
himself.
copyright discussions.
Yeah.
There was no copyright discussions, and of course it must have been a bit confusing for Tina Turner's lawyers in Los Angeles or New York when they start to hear about this. They maybe thought it really was a legitimate army or something, possibly the army of the Irish Republic or something, and they made their inquiries, and it was a London lawyer, and you think they would know, but they don't know. A
Mm.
London lawyer contacted John White's office in Belfast. Now, John White was Adair's friend who was basically the office manager. But of course, he had served life imprisonment for the brutal slaying of the SDLP Senator Paddy Wilson and his friend Irene Andrews when he stabbed them over 88 times and was jailed for that. So by this time in the early 90s, he's running the office of the UDA office. And he's taken all the political inquiries, and he gets this call from prestigious lawyers in London who are representing Miss Tina Turner, and they want to talk to Mr. Johnny Adair. They've been told to ask for him, and he's not there. But they explain their situation that Miss Turner's lawyers are furious that they've taken it upon themselves just to take this song, which is being used for advertising basically in
Mm.
Belfast.
Mm.
And White told the solicitor he would pass it on to Mr. Adair, and he did. And Adair, as he said, explained to me last week, he said, "Imagine trying to sue someone from the Shankill Road."
So I was just going to say he didn't cease and desist, obviously.
Oh, he said that he did not follow their. He
No.
basically said, "Get lost." That was his attitude to it. It was the last thing he was going to do was comply with the lawyers representing Tina Turner. I think he was a bit disappointed in the whole thing because he was a great fan of Tina. He said to me when I was chatting to him, I said, "Tina, perhaps I told him that, informed him that Tina had died." He said, "Ach, old Tina," he said, "she was the queen of soul." You know.
So he continued to use it. And did they do anything? Did her lawyers? I mean, what could you do against
No,
an
no.
organization like his?
Well. You see, the Tina Turner's solicitors just joined the queue because prior to that, Nike had been on asking them to stop wearing their clothes.
Had they?
Because, yeah, because he's very well dressed man, Johnny Adair, and he liked good quality casual clothes and was never seen in a different T-shirt. Boss or Nike were his favorites, but Nike were a bit annoyed that it was the wrong kind of person to be wearing their stuff. So they contacted Mr. White again, but it bit the dust as well. There was no he refused to stop wearing. He said he'd wear anything he liked.
You do often wonder sometimes. I mean, I do often wonder would the fine people from Hugo Boss be a little bit you know, concerned about the use of their clothing by the likes of Daniel Kinahan and so forth and etc. What can they do? Um,
Well,
but that's interesting that they got in contact with them as well.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so listen, even more interesting, and we've spoken about it, we've touched on it before, is your peculiar sort of conversations with Adair these days. You having written the book about him, which he wasn't too pleased about. I suppose your past history, where you have uh, a colourful history yourself as a reporter in the North, and those you were, you know, befriended and those you didn't. But it's kind of like come full circle, the business like relationship you have with Adair. And he's now seems to be quite happy to take your calls, to talk to you, and to discuss things that happened in the past. He seems very open at talking nowadays.
Well, I think enough time has passed, Nicola, for Johnny Adair to reflect on things. And I mean, they would do. Some people involved in politics today up here could take a leaf out of his book as far as media matters is concerned, because he can discuss things with you, whereas others up here are rude to you, refuse to speak to you, and they're all involved in getting well paid by the public purse. But Adair has matured immensely, and I have to point out there's never a conversation goes past between him and I where he emphasizes his support for the Good Friday Agreement. And he said, it's over. There is no room for paramilitaries in Northern Ireland. And you can't take that away from him.
So he's looking towards the future. But briefly, before I ask you what life is like for him now, let's go back to what sort of things were happening with his sea, the Shankill Seacoy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Around the time that they were using that song, what sort of atrocities were they suspected of and responsible for?
Oh, well, they were out several times a day doing. They could not. There was no plan the police could not get a handle on it. There was no pattern or plan. He had one volunteer working for him, a guy called Gary Whitty McMaster. I mean, he did several attacks on Sinn Féin premises on one day and went out the next day and did the same. So all of this type of thing was happening. And they were also in Adair's stable was the guy known as Stevie Top Gun McCaig, reputed to have killed well over a dozen people, maybe over 2 dozen, and they were all well paid. There was a huge income coming into the UDA stroke UFF at that time. What seems today is a much softer attitude to drugs. The E-tabs were rife, and they were early purveyors of E-tabs, and it had a huge income. I mean, I looked into some of the money that McCaig was earning. I mean, he was earning thousands of pounds a week was his wages. So he would have been a willing gunman to keep up his income.
There's something kind of cult like when you look back on those pictures of people wearing these T-shirts with simply the best on them, and that whole sort of sense of occasion whenever Adair came out at the time. And you know, um, would you see him as being personality wise now? You know him more nowadays. I suppose maybe he's softened, but would he have been somebody who, in a different life, could have been that kind of cult like leader of people?
He had a skill. Without doubt, he had a leadership skill. Um, I, I remember the night when the Shankill feud happened, and the two men were shot dead, and it went on for weeks. And then the net result was Adair's faction had to leave Northern Ireland and move to Scotland. And of course, when he was eventually released from jail, the police took him immediately for his own safety to Scotland, and from there he went down to England for a while and came back to Scotland. He lives on the west coast of Scotland, but he had an ability to enthuse people. It was described to me as being similar to a basketball coach. There was an attack on a pub known as in the centre of the Shankill Road, frequented by UVF men, and it was the subject of a machine gun attack. I can say it today because he's dead. The machine gunner was Sam Skelly McCrory. But prior to the attack starting, this was all filmed from nearby Divis Tower by the British Army, and they could see Adair in the middle of a circle of young men, giving instructions, telling them what to do. And then he jumped back. Of course, he has nothing to do with it, but he's enthused all them. And seconds later, you could hear the rat-a-tat-tat of the machine gun fire as the bullets hit the Rex bar in the middle of the Shankill Road. And so he had planned that in great detail, and he instructed each man what their job was.
He'd an insatiable appetite for violence as a young man, and you know, has that gone? Has he left that behind? Do you know what is his current life like?
He has no danger to the Scottish police. They have absolutely no interest in Johnny Adair. He has a young son that he looks after on his own, and he does a very good job. He goes to see Rangers and travels to Glasgow. He's got loyalist friends up there. He's still very, very popular. He's still very, very popular in Belfast, even though he was basically exiled. But he is still popular in his old stomping ground of the Lower Shankill Road. If he came back tomorrow, he would be welcomed like a returning hero.
What age is he now?
Oh, so he's 59, 60 in his next birthday,
Okay.
towards the end of the year.
So he lives a quiet life.
He lives a quiet life. He trains every morning. He goes out for a run, up a hill, down a hill, and then he pounds the punch bag, and he's that's his life.
And is perfectly happy to take a phone call from you whenever you ring, or you've built up a little bit of you're certainly in dialogue, the two of you nowadays.
Yes, and he does have a finger on the pulse as far as what's happening in Belfast. His contacts, he would know more about Belfast than a lot of people living in Belfast because he's well informed.
And is he still a Tina Turner fan?
As far as I know, yes, Tina Turner, and of course you've got to remember, Mr. Adair was a musician and performer himself. As he played in the band, he was the bass player in a band called Offensive Weapon. They were a punk band, perfectly named, and the lead singer is the now deceased Sam Skelly McCrory. So I mean, that's what he felt. He was a bit annoyed at Tina Turner because he felt that being fellow performers, there was a bit of a bond, or should have been a bond between them. But he was disappointed when.
I think you could probably say he was just misunderstood, was he?
I think he was, yeah.
Well, listen, I've absolutely no doubt we're going to come back to Johnny Adair on another occasion and talk about him some more. But I suppose for the moment, we leave it at, our sympathies to Tina Turner's family and her tragic passing at 83. And obviously, our sympathies to Mr. Adair for the horrific way that she came looking for her rights, for her song back.
Right. That's right.
Okay, Hugh Jordan, thank you very much.
Right, Nicola, bye.